just begin with, the message that was carved over the oracle at the Temple of Delphi in Greece. And it was just 2 words, and it said, "Know thyself." And so that's like the beginning of the quest, self-knowledge, and there's so many ways to do it. We're incredibly lucky now. There's so many ways to do this. You can start off very simply by doing personality tests online and then gradually moving to a kind of deeper and deeper knowledge. I think the way of psychosynthesis is great because you get to know yourself through a psychological lens, but that's informed by spirituality. I think Druidry is great because it brings in the element of nature and tradition. There are many other ways to develop that self-knowledge. Always with a sense that it's not just about you. There's a little bit of a paradox here because you would think that would make you more self-absorbed. And, the hippie generation were accused of being the me generation because they were the people that started the human potential movement and started this focus. There's a risk that you become self-obsessed. We see that in the Instagram kind of pop psych world too. Everybody's obsessed with themselves and making themselves better and all that stuff. But sometimes you have to go through that journey of spending, of looking within, and starting with yourself, and then, but always bearing in mind, because I believe that the self is essentially radiant. Your soul is radiant like the sun. And that what gives us the greatest happiness and makes us the greatest people is when we actually don't think so much about ourselves, but about other people. And we're interested in love, and we want to be kind, and we want to be good, and we want to be creative, and we want to give to the world. So that's a kind of radiant model. But often when we're young, we have hang-ups and conflicts and struggles and all the rest of it. And so you begin this path, this quest, but it's a really exciting, wonderful quest, I think. So that's, you follow your star, as they say,
And welcome back to another installment of Behind Greatness by Inspire. It's Luciano here speaking as your host. We are joined by Philip Carr-Gomm. Philip, who joins us from Sussex in the countryside. I think I heard birds chirping before we started to press record, so that was very comforting. Unless those are the voices in my head, but let's just pretend that they are not. Philip, I'm going to try something new here. In 7 seconds, how would you introduce yourself to somebody who asks, "What are you about?"
Oh, I'm somebody who is fascinated by the meeting place between psychology and spirituality. It's always fascinated me from a kid onwards.
Okay, so let's pluck out what we want to pluck out from this. So you grew up in the 50s. So I obviously, for the audience, I know a little bit about your background, so we can get to some meaty points. You grew up in the 50s, mostly in the 60s. You were you were a self-described hippie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you actually started off almost at the beginning of our first conversation about a mystical experience that you had. Let's start from there. You want to describe that?
Well, I'm not sure which one, because the number that I described.
I like this.
Yeah, but I mean, I saw a ghost when I was a little kid, a woman in blue walking across the room, and then when I was older, I started to meditate. I read a book when I was 11 called The Life of the Buddha. I tried to meditate as much as I could, and then when I was 16 or 17, I took LSD, and like many of my generation at that time when Timothy Leary and Ram Dass were, preaching, I had an extremely mystical experience, a number of mystical experiences that were extremely profound, extremely beautiful, and really the combination of my having read about spirituality, particularly Buddhism, and my experience with psychedelics set me on a course to integrate, to have more of those experiences and to integrate them into my daily life and to live my life from that perspective of sensing life as being more than just the world of appearances, more than just the materialistic consumerist world that had been built up around us.
You said there were a number of them. So give us a little bit of context of the experience that you had that gave you that kind of revelation. What are you willing to describe to us of one of those experiences?
Well, I think the outstanding, I suppose the outstanding feature was one of feeling one with all of life, the cosmos. No separation between self and other, between subject and object, and which is the classic kind of mystical state, kind of union with the divine, if you like, and a sense of dropping, the sense of time changing radically. I have a friend who's a psychologist who's written a book on time expansion experiences, and so he dives into them in the whole book, where he looks at people's experiences of time expansion. Where suddenly, and in these mystical experiences, suddenly either time doesn't exist or it's just a minute feels like, hours. And the other time expansion I had, just to give you an idea what they're like, was when I fell down a hole in New Zealand. And as I traveled down, I had an experience which is quite common when people go through some kind of crisis, that time absolutely slowed down. When I hit the bottom, I snapped back into an awareness of everyday time. But as I was dropping down, apparently it happens in car crashes. People have car crashes. Sometimes they have this experience of everything slowing down. You look puzzled.
Okay. No, not puzzled. So obviously I didn't know about this falling down a hole in New Zealand. How long was that fall? How long were you in free fall before you hit the bottom?
It was. I was with these friends in Auckland. I had said goodnight to my hosts. They'd given me a cup of tea. I was walking through the garden and then back up the stairs to a separate building that they had put me in that had a bedroom in it. And I opened the door and stepped forward, thinking I was stepping forward into the bedroom. But instead, I opened the door and dropped down a floor. So it was a floor, however deep a floor is. What is that? I don't know, 7 feet or something, 8 feet, I don't know. Yeah. Apparently, the week before, it had been full of glass. They dismantled a greenhouse. So it would have been very nasty the week before. But somehow I managed to, I guess perhaps it's one of the body's ways of not tensing up. You're more likely to break stuff if you tense up. So I was floppy because I was kind of almost enjoying the experience, with a profound sense of it's okay. This is okay. Not a massive adrenaline hit with, oh my God, what's happening? But this is okay. This is okay. I kind of surrender, which is another feature of a mystical experience. Actually, is surrender, the ability to let, and the Christian mystics talking about let go to God. You let go. And in the psychedelic experience, it's the same thing. If you resist the wave, as it were, it can be extremely uncomfortable. But if you let go and relax and float downstream, as the Beatles said, you're more likely to have a pleasant experience.
Do you think that kind of experience is a foreboding of what might happen after we die?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think our experience of time is psychological. It's relative. It's dependent. It's bound by our consciousness, and in a way, you can get a sense of this by when you think back and think what you've done over the last month or something, or last week even. Sometimes it can seem like a very long period of time. It's like, wow, did that only happen last week, or it can seem like yesterday. So it's elastic. So our sense of time is conditioned. And it's relative, I believe, to this physical world and our material life. So when we die and cast off our body, I believe we go into a different dimension in which we experience time in a completely different way.
You told me that in one of your one of your experiences, one of your mystical experiences, you had a vision or an experience of vast beings who told you to get off the LSD and to get onto a path without it, or the same path of discovery without it.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I took psychedelics. I used not to talk about this at all because it's kind of quite a sensitive area. But given what's happened in the last few years and the revival of interest in psychedelics and lots of clinical trials and so on, it kind of feels okay to talk about it now. Probably from the age of 16 or 17, probably maybe 17, through to say 19, so just a couple of years, I took LSD a number of times. I'm not sure exactly how many. And then on the final trip, I met these huge beings, a bit like, in The Lord of the Rings. So they're going through along some river, and there are these great statues of tall beings that are huge. So they're really big, and they said, "Stop. Don't come here anymore. This is real now. Now you need to go back and just work at developing your awareness, developing yourself spiritually in a way that you can access these realms without having to take anything." And so I spent the next 50 years doing that. I stopped. I dived into all sorts of meditation practices, spiritual practices of all sorts of different kinds.
Have you met those beings since?
In different ways, not exactly the same ones, but I've met beings in other ways. Yeah. I mean, different beings, I would say, I suppose.
No. You're not allowed not to share.
Okay. Oh, well, okay.
Go.
So of all the methods one of the most powerful methods I have learned since this experience was I went to Ireland and stayed in a wonderful castle, a spiritual center that was a castle, through a lady that I met at my Druid teacher's house in London. And she invited me to this place. And she had developed a method of meditation that is extremely powerful that she taught me in the end. And you many people know about guided meditations. You can find them on YouTube, 10 a dozen, somebody's voice taking you on a journey, imagining a beautiful place and so on. So it's very common, and you can do it in groups and so on. But what this does, if you can imagine that, but if you can imagine being in a ceremony where you have various, you're charged up with energy and the circle is black, and then you lie on a couch, and then you're led into a guided meditation by one person who's sitting next to you like a psychoanalyst, just beside you, you're lying on a couch. And, just as the analyst sits at the head of the couch, they're sitting there. So their voice is really close to you, and they're leading you on a journey. But here's the difference from the usual thing that most of us know is she asks questions. So she says, imagine you're now in the forest and you're walking along a path. What do you see? And the extraordinary thing is you go so deep, because there's various techniques prior to this point, that you're almost catatonic. So when I do it with people, the person's voice is like this, because they can hardly move their mouth, because they're deep in this visualization. And that's extremely powerful. And so I was on one of those journeys when I met a huge being that was this kind of presiding angel deity of a hill in Ireland. It was a kind of energetic being. It was extraordinary. Quite extraordinary.
Yeah, are you able to describe what they look like?
Well,
did they speak to you?
Like probably 100 feet high, 80 feet high, just 20 feet wide. A roughly humanoid form. In other words, but light, red. It was particularly kind of red and golden, sort of pouring out from them. And it wasn't a human being. It was like a spiritual being of some kind, And I would say, normally I would say, when people tell me their stories of what they see in meditations and so on, I tend to treat them like dreams, that there may be psychological representations of an internal state or a repressed memory or something like that. But the interesting thing about this experience, which is why I say it's the closest I think I've got to a psychedelic experience, but without taking anything, is because it appears to be completely objective. I mean, it's not your imagination. When you listen to a kind of guided meditation on YouTube or something like that, you sometimes wonder whether you're kind of, suggestion, they're telling you to see something and you're kind of making it up with your mind, which is fine. There's a validity in stretching the muscles of the imagination, but you wonder whether you're making it up. This was like completely spontaneous and did not seem to be generated by my mind. It seemed to have some objective reality. Now, of course, it could be a fantasy. I mean, it could be a completely fantasy. Who knows,
Well, just like a dream could be a fantasy, I guess.
Well, it's the distinction. I mean, with dreams, you have lucid dreams, which I don't know if you've ever had one of those, but lucid dreams when you wake up in the middle of the dream and it's like, oh my God, I'm dreaming. And usually you just kind of snap back into your everyday awareness because you're kind of surprised. But you can learn how to stay within the lucid dream, and then you can do stuff like flying around and kind of inhabiting the dream. And there's lucid dreaming, and then there's what Jung called, the psychologist Carl Jung, the big dreams. Big dreams as opposed to, say, daytime residue dreams. Daytime residue dreams is, you might wake up in the night having a dream, and it was a kind of mishmash of the stuff you watched on television that evening, or the events that you went through during the day. It's just kind of clear to you that. So those are called daytime residue dreams. Or you'll have a dream that is so clearly psychological, like you had a row with your boss during the day, and then the dream that night is you're fighting somebody, you're in a bar and you're in a brawl or something like that, and you kind of no, that's my feelings of aggression towards my boss or whatever. And then sometimes, just occasionally, you'll have this kind of beautiful, crystal clear dream that when you wake up, you feel wonderful and you're filled with a kind of happiness, like you've touched into some other level of reality. And I believe that other level of reality that we touch into, I believe it's real. I also believe that if it isn't real, I don't care, because it makes me feel better. It makes me a better person. It has, benefits at the level of the, my psychology, my nervous system, all the rest of it. I just happen to believe it's true too. That it really exists.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say you don't care because it makes you feel better. My question is, why does it make you feel better, and what is better?
Okay. Well, feeling better, I would suggest, Luciano, is pretty graspable by most people. I mean, it's like you feel happier. You maybe feel more relaxed, more kind of centered in your body. And all the studies show, I mean, particularly in the field of what's now known as positive psychology, lots of research has been done now on stuff that makes you feel better and stuff that doesn't. And generally, positive news makes you feel better. And by feel better, I mean, you feel healthier, your physiology responds. And we know that physiology responds to mental states. All I have to do is suggest to you that I'm now going to cut a fresh lemon in half and hand it to you, and you must put it in your mouth and bite down on the lemon. And if you visualize that clearly, your salivary glands will start to secrete. So your physiology has been affected by a thought, essentially. So we know the power of mind over matter, of the influence of thoughts and feelings on the body. So by feeling better, I mean, at every level, physiologically better, my nervous system is calmed and energized. My emotions are regulated and positive as opposed to negative. And my thoughts are calmer and kind of generally more interesting.
I'll take it. I'll take it all. Feeling better. I don't know why I'm stuck on this, because yes, it's very, very well said. It's graspable by most. Yeah, of course. But I had a lucid dream in the recent past, and I think it's been my only lucid dream, or at least the only one I can remember in the recent past. And I felt extremely empowered within this dream.
Great.
I felt knowing, like I'm not going to say all knowing, but I felt a knowing that I wanted to share. And I was extremely upset when I woke up because I felt like I had work to do and I was interrupted. I felt better in that lucid dream than most of my waking hours. But it's not because it felt euphoric and not because I felt like I was in a heavenly place, but because I felt an awareness that I had never felt before. And it informed me that I had work to do. Like there felt like a very actionable episode.
Well, isn't that beautiful? Because it's exactly what you describe. It's like, as people talk about the near-death experience, they have these kind of lucid experiences when they've technically died. And then they come back with this feeling of like, there's some work to do, And,
sure. Right.
It's like, so you had like an experience there. And so I believe that experience that you had, I mean, that's the kind of core. When the first question you asked me is, describe yourself in, what are you interested in 7 seconds or whatever it was. It's like those glimpses tell us about human potential. I mean, it's like that. That's who we really are. It's like you accessed who Luciano really is, like your full self, and then, for all sorts of reasons, we kind of diminish ourselves because of, responsibilities and, the bandwidth we have in our heads and our, all the rest of it. But in a way, the goal of spiritual development and personal development is, in my opinion, is for us to somehow, to find ways to let that big self through more and more, and that's kind of been the focus of my life, really. And it's the kind of topic, the area of study that fascinates me the most.
Well, excellent. So I'm so glad that I didn't introduce you as a Druid because that was I felt that was the easy thing to do. And that was obviously one of the main reasons why we reached out to you, because you're practicing Druid, you are a Druid, but I know that's a label and that's not what you are. I think. That's not your name tag, but that's part of what you are. It seems like it's just part of your overall mission. But so let me add something else, and then I want to open it up to you. But I'm going to say unfortunate, and maybe in parenthesis a small fortunate part of humanity is that we need to understand things through story. Or we best understand things through story, I think. I mean, I know I do. And understanding your personal story and how you came into the world of Druidry, can I say that? Druidism? Druidry. Does inform, and I think would inform the audience on why we just had this 22-minute conversation without mentioning it. So please do me the favor. Let's diminish ourselves a little bit. Moving away from the big self. At 11 years old, if you don't mind just bringing us through that little episode that kind of opened up a little bit for you.
Yeah, well, what happened, and thank you. You put that really beautifully, and thank you for starting in that way, as you say, because my Druidry, if you like, is just one part of me, and it's one aspect of me, if you like. But we got to the core thing. My core interest and orientation is this, I don't know what you want to call it. And this is one of the problems, like, do you call it, where psychology meets spirituality, helping the big self exist? It's kind of not easy to articulate it. But basically what happened when I was 11, two things happened. I opened a book called The Life of the Buddha that my dad had lying around. And I read about the life of the Buddha, and I read about his journey to enlightenment. And I thought, well, this is the only game in town. I mean, why would you do anything else? This is obviously the journey that, to be taken. And at the same time, my dad introduced me to the old chief druid in London because he was a friend of his and he worked for him. He was running a college in London. And so that began when I was around 16. I became fascinated by the idea of the Druids and the fact that they were these kind of magicians. And, I was living in England, this magical landscape of places like Stonehenge and all the rest of it. And I asked to train with him. And then, for a number of years afterwards, I would, travel to his house and he would teach me about Druidism. And basically, very simply, what it does is it provides this sense of connection with nature and with trees in particular. There's a sense of connection with heritage, with a spiritual tradition that's very ancient, with a kind of way of magic, if you like, and with nature. The tricky thing about talking about the topics that we were talking about before is that they can feel very conceptual, abstract, dry. And then, with Druid, as you say, there's a story there straight away. There are images, there are sacred groves and stone circles and magic ceremonies and so on. But I find it limiting because, of course, people come with preconceptions and don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, and there are two things. But let's touch upon a little bit of historical relevance, because growing up here in the Western world, across the pond from you, we learned about Druidry in very, very small strokes, like so small that you'd forget about it because maybe it was mentioned in a history class between two sentences of other topics. But it did fascinate me back then. But any conversation around that was poo-pooed by, I guess, the religious color of my education. There was a tainting of Druidism. And as I got older, I got a little bit more curious, and now I'm much more curious. And that's because I know what happens in history. I've come to understand what happens in history. It's written by those who decide that this is going to be the message, really.
Yeah.
So one part of that history is that this chief Druid also ran a college, and you said he tutored Winston Churchill, which, I mean, is
no,
not...
the college. It was the college that Winston Churchill went to, but that was before the Druid, the chief Druid, took over. Yeah.
Okay. I see. I got it. All right. Okay. So there is a connection there, but it's looser than what I thought. All right.
Yeah.
But the other one was about, and this is, I just want you to mention this
just
too.
To interrupt you, there is a connection between Winston Churchill and the Druids because he became a Druid, Winston Churchill, and there's a wonderful photo. So there's kind of crazy connection there. You can find
not so loose.
Yeah. You type it in online, Winston Churchill Druid, and whack images online, and you'll find the image. At the height between the wars, there were about 1 million Druids around the world, particularly in the Commonwealth, Australia, New Zealand, America, and so on. And it was a kind of like a bit like the Rotarians, the Freemasons, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So and you'll find a photo of him wearing a false beard. They all used to wear false beards. I mean, it's kind of deliciously eccentric and wacky.
Okay, so I did not know this. Thank you. Jeez. Okay, so he was a druid. Can I ask, was he a practicing druid? Does that make sense as a question?
Who are we talking about? Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
No, if imagine you're at a party in Hollywood. And somebody, you're introduced to somebody, or anywhere, New York, and somebody introduces, and somebody says, "Oh, you must meet my friend, John. He's a druid, or she's a druid. Sophie, she's a druid." And you'll say, "Oh, how interesting." And what you have to say to her next is, "What kind of druid are you?" Because there are 3 different kinds. So there's a cultural druid. Cultural druids are people like the last Archbishop of Canterbury, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. I'm not sure about King Charles, whether he is, but certainly Elizabeth II was one. And they are Druids, and you can again Google it, Queen Elizabeth, Druid, and you'll find the photos, her in a Druid robe. And they supported the national Eisteddfod in Wales, a big cultural movement to promote the Welsh language and culture. It's the biggest cultural festival in Europe. It's televised every year, and it's set within and they do Druid ceremonies to showcase the event. And so that's a culture. They do not practice Druidry as a spiritual path. A lot of the cultural Druids are Christian, usually Methodist Christians. It's a cultural phenomenon that uses some ritual and ceremony and regalia, wonderful swords and stuff of the Druids of old. So if Sophie says to you she's one of those, you know the conversation will go towards Welsh culture. She'll obviously be from a Welsh family and so on and so on. If she says no, I'm a fraternal Druid. Now, fraternal Druid are Druids who belong to an organization that started in the 18th century, started in a pub in London in the 18th century, to kind of not rival, but like the Freemasons, to provide mutual support to people. The days before the health service, before insurance, you would join a club and you'd contribute a little bit of money every week, just a few pounds every week, like that. And then when one of you got ill, died, your house went up in flames, there would be a pot of money that could be used to help you, that could rebuild your house or send you to the doctor. So they were the very early kind of affinity groups for mutual welfare. They kind
sounds like an insurance company, the way you just described that right now.
They morphed into friendly societies and then insurance companies. So you can find, an insurance company in Australia that was originally, it's called something like Druids United Friendly or something like that, and it's an insurance company.
Amazing.
So that's, but they still exist. There's about 5,000 of them, I think, around the world who act a bit like Rotarians. They gather money for charities. They kind of use the symbology of Druidry, but again, they don't practice it as a spiritual way, right? Or Sophie might give them the most interesting reply of all, which is to say, "Oh, I follow Druidry as a spiritual path. It's my spiritual way." Yeah, and that will be because she's somebody who is using Druidism or Druidry as her particular spiritual orientation to life. But then you'd have to ask her how she does that, because she might be a Christian Druid. There are Christians who are Druids. She might be a polytheistic Druid who believes in lots of different gods and goddesses. She might be an atheistic Druid who doesn't like the concept of God. It's like, that doesn't help me. I can't kind of orientate myself around the idea of gods, or God, and so on. You'd have to dive into, because it's a very unique spiritual way that doesn't have any dogma. It's not a belief system. It's really weird. That's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in it, because I think belief systems are part of the trouble. Because, you believe in the Trinity. Well, I don't. I believe in the one true God. And you're telling me that God is three, and let's have a war about this and let's attack each other. Your God's name is Allah. Well, God's name is Jehovah. Let's fight. So belief systems are really problematic. And the remarkable thing about the Druid movement is that you can bring people together and they can all have very different beliefs, but something holds them together, and it's a love of nature, a reverence for the land, and for a real sense that trees are really important, are kind of spiritual companions for us, if you like. And various other ideas, but there's no dogma and no rigid belief system at all.
So thank you for that. Why trees?
Why
not blades of grass? Why not a porcupine? Why trees?
Bees or porcupines? Yes, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Because trees, although they look very different to us, our destinies are completely entwined with them. They create a good deal of the air that we breathe, the books that we read, the beds that we lie on, the houses that we live in, the coffins we're buried in, the fires that keep us warm. And they are manifestations of something deeper, which is the community of the forest. You know, the discoveries of what's known as the mycelium, this rich interconnectedness. Some people talk about the wood wide web, this web of connections where trees aren't isolated beings. They live as part of a community together. They work with the fungi and other plants and so on. And so there are these extraordinary, I mean, the oak tree, which is a really important tree in Druidry, is home to 600 different species. It provides this microenvironment for around 600 species of insects and birds and animals and so on. And there's a way in which they represent something which I can illustrate to you in this really simple way through the work of some psychologists coming out of Africa. I think it was Kenya originally, who developed a way of working with kids who'd been traumatized by being made to be soldiers, at the age of 11, the way they kill the parents and drag the kids into the jungle and then give them a gun and turn them into little soldiers. And then they get rescued. And they're these extremely traumatized kids. One of the ways of working with them in psychotherapy is you get them to draw a tree, because you can't ask them directly about, what happened, because it's all just too horrible and terrible. You have to sort of work with them in other ways. You get them to draw a tree, and when they draw the roots, you get them to talk about their roots. Where do you come from? What was the place like? And then eventually they'll start to talk about mom and dad and granddad and grandma and so on like that. Their roots, the ancestors, that's hidden in the soil, that's buried there. And then the trunk, it's like, where are you now? What's happening to you now, your environment? What's your life like now? How are you feeling inside? Are you crumpled? Are you upright? And then what do you hope for? What are your dreams? And you move up to the leaves, the fruits, the nuts, your hopes and aspirations, the things that make you happy, Really simple. And so the tree embodies this. It's kind of, in a natural way, the three realms of time that we all exist in. We all have a past, we all exist in the present, and we have a future as well.
The last couple of minutes here, I've been, while listening to you, trying to go through my experience amongst trees. And as a city kid, and then as a suburban adult, and my thoughts. You tell me here. This could be something so innocuous, like we'll just roll our eyes and go to the next topic. But when I see trees in solitary confinement, when I see solitary trees, I feel, or when I remember seeing them, I feel like it's unnatural that they are alone. So the interconnectedness of trees makes sense, because when I think of trees, I don't think of a tree. I think of trees. It's interesting. So anybody listening to this or watching this who lives in the city or in the suburbs, if they're walking down a street and they see the customary tree out front, that was planted by the developer because it's by city bylaws that you need to have a tree in front on the front lawn. Yeah. When you walk down those streets where you have these trees that are, adolescent trees, say they're 20-year-old trees or whatever, you feel better when you see them, when you walk, at least on the street, on asphalt or cement, and you see them. You feel even better when those trees are much larger and start to curve and come together at the top, covering the street. And absolutely. I know that when I take my walks, there are trees. There are a couple of streets in my neighborhood where there are these trees. And then I thought about it while you were talking about this and the interconnectedness of roots. Those trees necessarily are creating a loop or a circle underneath that street. So when you walk under them, you are walking through them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you know there's some It's a beautiful thought. You're going through that loop, and there's some fabulous research they've done. One piece of research, they took tree cover in urban and suburban environments, and they matched it with the statistics of visits to the doctor, right? And surprise, surprise, more tree cover, less doctor visits. And then a different study did connected that. It was done in Australia of people's experience of sleep and tree cover. And they also found a correlation between tree cover and scores of satisfactory sleep. Less tree cover, less satisfactory sleep, or problems with insomnia. There's this intimate bond, and it's like we're just starting to it's only recently, there's a wonderful lady, a forester called Suzanne Simard, I think it was Susan Simard, who wrote a book called The Mother Tree, where she was working in forestry. And, the whole regime there was, you clean the roots of the saplings before planting them so that they were kind of clean, and then they were trying to work out why so many of them died, So she started to look at the soil around roots and all the rest of it, and discovered that actually, no, they need to be dirty. They need to have all sorts of sort of microbial life and all the rest of it, so that they can then hook up with each other. That they haven't all been scrubbed and polished and separated. But they need to be. So she's done amazing work, and that was just recently on that. And there's lots of amazing work happening at the level of science. And I think what Druidry is doing is saying, yes, this confirms what we've always known and sensed, like that wonderful feeling, when you've spent, months in the city, and then you maybe take a drive out at the weekend to a forest, and you go walking with your family in the woods. And it's like, oh, yeah. Yeah. And,
yes.
and yeah, it's just
always.
And you can explain it scientifically in the amazing experiments in Japan where they put people in hotel rooms. They've done double-blind trials. People sleeping in hotel rooms. They take blood samples before and after, before the night and the next morning. During the night, some of the rooms have the essential oils from trees pumped into the room through the air conditioning, and then some of the rooms don't have it. Take the blood samples afterwards, and you find that people's immune systems are functioning better. They've been boosted during the night by breathing in these tree phenols or whatever they're called, terpenes, I think. Yeah.
None of this surprises me.
So we know it's there at a scientific level. And what Druidry, it just adds another layer, saying, there's an aesthetic layer to add on to that, which is like, they're beautiful. They're just wonderful. They just look so gorgeous. There's an aesthetic layer, and then Druids would posit that there's a spiritual layer. There's something more than just beauty and health and beauty. There's something else as well.
If a tree could speak our spoken languages, what would they tell us?
They'd say, hey, stop chopping so many of us down. Start planting more of us, and start communing with us. Sit with us. You talked about the lonely tree, when you go out for a walk and all the rest of it. There's a really interesting experiment you can do where you can kind of walk in the woods and just feel which trees you're drawn to, and you sit under them. It's no coincidence that the Buddha gained enlightenment sitting beneath the Bodhi tree. Or in the Jain tradition, the great sage Mahavira gained enlightenment sitting beneath a tree. There's a relationship to be had there that, from a kind of everyday perspective, it may sound kind of nutty, if you like, and you say, well, you can sit next to a horse or a flower or something, but there's something about sitting beneath a tree that can really gift something to you.
Are dreams at all connected? Our dreaming connected to the plant world or trees, or is that a stretch?
Well, no. You can get there because you can climb up the tree, and into another world. And then shamanic cultures around the world, from Siberia through to the other places as well. The tree is used as a symbol. It's like the totem pole of the three, what are known as the three worlds. In psychology, from a psychological perspective, you're talking about everyday consciousness, which is like the trunk. It's here, everyday consciousness. You climb up the tree and you go into the superconscious, the realm that you maybe touched when you had that lucid dream the other day, and you were kind of in your superconscious, if you like, or the superconscious. But if you go back down the other way, you climb down the tree and you find there's a little, sometimes you get a little hole in the side of the trunk where, you climb in it. If you go in there, make yourself small, and you'll find a little staircase going down, and you go down the staircase in amongst the roots, and you're in the underworld. And the underworld is a beautiful place, but it's also a tricky place. And because it's a tricky place, that's how it got kind of distorted into concepts of hell in certain mythologies. But it's a place where your repressed urges and desires are. It's the kind of basement of the psyche. It's the subconscious. So when the Italian psychiatrist Assagioli asked Freud, he said to Freud once, your vision of the human being, I really get it, and it's obviously extremely valuable, but aren't you interested in the higher faculties, like, beauty and, spirituality and all the rest of it? And Freud said, no, I'm only interested in the basement. He's interested in the gorilla in the basement, all the tricky, nasty, conflicting stuff there. And that's what we push down, we push down. And it's for a good reason, because we can't handle it, so we have trauma, can't handle the trauma. It goes into the subconscious. And then maybe it comes out in dreams, comes out on the psychoanalyst's couch. It comes out in passive aggression. It comes out in slips of the tongue. Comes out in some way or another. And, one of the values of psychoanalysis is you learn to, you take that journey down the stairway, down into the roots, and you kind of get to know your underworld. And you gradually follow what Freud called the royal road of the unconscious. But what shamanism suggests and what spiritual psychology suggests, like psychosynthesis, which is a psychology I trained in, which was introduced by this guy, Assagioli, who's an Italian psychiatrist, is that there's also a superconscious. And you touched that in your dream, and I've touched it in my mystical experiences, and it's just as real as the subconscious.
Maybe the basement is, maybe it's upside down. Maybe what we refer to as the basement, the roots of the tree, the real network, is where we really are anyway. Maybe that is the ascended human being, because the connection is there. We all understand each other. If we strip everything away, and if we strip everything away from the tree, the roots remain, because that's what matters.
Well, yeah, you're onto something there, because if you think about it, if you think, that you got the distortion of hell, you have, the human beings' kind of, revolting characteristics that we assign with hell, darkness, and then through the story of Christianity, it tended to get associated with the feminine, with the night, with evil, all those things get pushed down. And then you have these eruptions from the subconscious, which explains, the kind of awful abuse stories you find in the church, for instance, and so on. We think, well, how can these spiritual people behave so abusively towards kids or something like that? It's because it's erupting out of their subconscious. They pushed it down and then it erupts out like that. But with psychotherapy, or with a different spiritual approach that you hinted at, you start to develop a relationship with your unconscious, with your subconscious. That's where your memories are. That's where your ancestors are, your grandparents and great-grandparents, and that's where the ancestors of humanity are. And that's where the mycelium is that connects us all together. And is so actually can be really a beautiful place, because that's where the kind of community of humanity is rooted and connects in the end to deity. So there's a strange experience in the spiritual experience. If you go down for long enough, you find yourself going up.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you descend long enough and time stands still, it doesn't matter what's up and down.
Yeah, up and down doesn't doesn't make sense anymore. In the Kabbalistic tradition, all that idea was encapsulated in the term Kether is in Malkuth. Malkuth is the earth, the sort of lowest level, if you like. Kether is the highest level, heaven, if you like. And they're saying Kether is in Malkuth, so that actually, the two are united. Precisely that idea that you talked about.
When you die, where will you be? How will you be?
Well, what I believe is that consciousness isn't bound by the body, that consciousness is not an epiphenomenon of brain activity. Some people believe that, it's just the electrical impulses in the brain cells generate this experience that we call consciousness. That's the materialist viewpoint. I take what's known in philosophy as the idealist viewpoint, which is that actually the prime basis of reality is consciousness. And then part of that prime basis, there is a kind of aggregate, which we call the material world. So it's completely upside down, that materialists have got it upside down. They're seeing the world upside down, that the reality is that this is all consciousness. And then part of that field is kind of crystallized as physical matter. So when I die and I let go of my body, I am kind of freed of some of the kind of weight of that. And I'm in this realm that has different laws. My experience of time and space is very different. And here's the value of spiritual development and personal development. If I've been working through my lifetime with consciousness, then a bit like you and your lucid dream, where if you have more lucid dreams and you can do kind of lucid dream training and stuff like that, you can learn how to navigate, and you can learn how to fly, how to move around in it, and how to say, okay, I'm lucid dreaming now. I want to go and explore this part of the world or this level of awareness, or so on. I believe I will be able to do that, and that's why it helps to kind of sort out one's stuff, if you like. That's the value I believe in psychotherapy. Sort out some of those conflicts and tricky things that are existing in your subconscious, so you can be clear of that. So you haven't got so much baggage. So when the body falls away, you haven't got great big heavy suitcases to cart around of stuff you still haven't worked out, people you haven't said sorry to, and people you haven't forgiven, and all the rest of it. You've kind of done that work. And then you can just take off and have a ball.
Well, maybe the next time we chat, we can go further into this, be a little bit more educated. But I did promise you no more than an hour. I know that you have other appointments as well. Two more things. One is I had forgotten to ask you very quickly, because this is a point of fascination for me too. You were the founder of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids.
No, my teacher was the founder. He founded the Order of Bards of it in 1964, and then I led it for 32 years from 1988.
Okay, very briefly, because we'll put it in the show notes as well. What is the purpose of that order?
That is to really spread the teachings of Druidry. There's this particular approach to life. And so we have a training program in 6 languages. We have about 37,000 members. We have 300 groups around the world, and and there are all sorts of people. I mean, a whole range. I mean, we have special interest groups within that. So, for instance, I'm in the mental health professionals group, and we have 567 people in that. So we have different, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, doctors, and so on. So we have all sorts of different groups within that. We have an online meeting place called the Druid Hearth, where we have 100 special interest groups. The training program in 6 languages. We have about 5 online magazines. We have, Zoom workshops and webinars and all sorts of stuff. So I've been involved in that, but I've handed on the reins to a wonderful psychologist in Ireland, a lady called Emma Burke. And
Female Burke. Okay, remember that. So we'll put that in the show notes. Maybe the next time, if you're willing to come back, we can talk about that too.
I'd be happy to, Luciano. I'd be happy to.
Okay. So then, last question before we let you go. If a young person came to you and asked you, and I'm pretending I'm that young person, by the way, just so you know, in parentheses, and they ask you, I want to be great. I want to do great things. What would be your advice?
I want to be great. Just begin with, the message that was carved over the oracle at the Temple of Delphi in Greece. And it was just 2 words, and it said, "Know thyself." And so that's like the beginning of the quest, self-knowledge, and there's so many ways to do it. We're incredibly lucky now. There's so many ways to do this. You can start off very simply by doing personality tests online and then gradually moving to a kind of deeper and deeper knowledge. I think the way of psychosynthesis is great because you get to know yourself through a psychological lens, but that's informed by spirituality. I think Druidry is great because it brings in the element of nature and tradition. There are many other ways to develop that self-knowledge. Always with a sense that it's not just about you. There's a little bit of a paradox here because you would think that would make you more self-absorbed. And, the hippie generation were accused of being the me generation because they were the people that started the human potential movement and started this focus. There's a risk that you become self-obsessed. We see that in the Instagram kind of pop psych world too. Everybody's obsessed with themselves and making themselves better and all that. But sometimes you have to go through that journey of spending, of looking within, and starting with yourself, and then, but always bearing in mind, because I believe that the self is essentially radiant. Your soul is radiant like the sun. And that what gives us the greatest happiness and makes us the greatest people is when we actually don't think so much about ourselves, but about other people. And we're interested in love, and we want to be kind, and we want to be good, and we want to be creative, and we want to give to the world. So that's a kind of radiant model. But often when we're young, we have hang-ups and conflicts and struggles and all the rest of it. And so you begin this path, this quest, but it's a really exciting, wonderful quest, I think. So that's, you follow your star, as they say,
Well, thank you for that. You mentioning the word quest quite clearly defines this answer as stick to the long game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there really isn't any other game, really.
Yeah. Like the Buddha's quest for enlightenment, it's a long game, and our society is geared around quick fixes and. But I've been doing this for 50 years, and I'm making gains all the time. And I take great kind of solace from my mum, who died at 98. And, when she was, I remember sitting with her, at the age of 98, and she would say to me things like, "I think I'm making progress." And, the everyday's part of me would say, "What are you talking about? You're 98. You're kind of on the way out." But she, she would smile and say, "I'm making progress." And I just love that. I want to keep that attitude for the rest of my life.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Philip, this has been like a walk through the forest. So wonderful chat.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm so glad. It's been an absolute pleasure, Luciano. Yeah, thank you.